Hey, what's up, everyone? I want to welcome you guys to another episode of Here's What I Think with your host, Charles Tabansi, where we discuss everything from current events, economics, politics, and how it all relates to business and life. And today we have a very serious show, a very, very serious show. With just 2 weeks left before the election, which takes place on November 5th, one of the biggest issues or biggest concerns for Americans during this election cycle would be the economy. And it's always usually at the top of the list for people. People generally vote their pocketbooks. And I think that that's going to be one of the things that takes place this current election cycle. But going into this election, both of these candidates, and Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, have presented their various economic plans for the Americans. But in the case of Donald Trump, he has one particular plan that is drawing a lot of controversy and a lot of conversation and some pushback from a lot of financial analysts, which is his proposed tariffs on countries like China and other countries across the board. Donald Trump has made it 100% clear that he's going to impose tariffs on these countries because the Americans and the American economy has been getting the short end of the stick when it comes to the exports. And some people have been a bit concerned about this economic proposal. But you have other people out there that think that it's a very good thing. So what happened? Just, I believe, 2 or 3 days ago, I was combing through the internet, and I came across a video that surprised me, frankly. And it featured a Republican commentator and a left, not a Democrat, maybe a left-leaning commentator in the name of David Pakman. I forget the gentleman who seemed to be leaning right. And they were talking about one of the most pivotal issues this election, which is Trump's tariffs. And to the shock of me and many people who saw that clip, it seemed to me that there are a lot of people who still don't understand the devastating impact these tariffs could potentially have on everyday Americans. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to play a quick compilation of some of the key highlights in this conversation here, and then we're going to come back and really get into the meat and potatoes of today's show. Take a listen to this exchange here.
So when it comes to Trump, do you dislike his policies or him as a person or both?
I don't dislike Trump as a person in the sense that I've never met the guy. So I think he has a lot of personality traits that make him completely unsuited to being president. And also, I think his policy prescriptions, to the extent that they exist and he understands them, which is a different part of it. A lot of the stuff Trump talks about, he still doesn't know how tariffs work. We're 8 years into this thing, 9 years in. He still thinks China pays the tariffs when they're paid by American companies.
Yeah, I've seen him talk about tariffs.
Very confused guy.
Wait, so China's not paying tariffs right now?
The tariffs are paid by the American companies that import the Chinese goods. That's the way it's such a fundamental, and I see you looking a little confused on this one.
Yeah, I'm confused.
This is the way tariffs work. What Trump did is place tariffs on Chinese imports. By the time the imports get here, China's been paid for the stuff. Maybe they get net 120 terms, right? But in a sense, China has already transacted. The American company who brings the goods in pays the tariffs.
Really?
You're kidding right now.
No, I thought he said he was raising the tariffs by 50 to 100% for Chinese imports.
You got to clip this. I'm begging you. You got to clip this and send it to me.
I'm genuinely
None
confused.
of this stuff is getting cut out, right?
No.
Oh, my God.
We post everything.
Please. The tariffs are paid by the company that does the importing. So if you want to build a building in the U.S. and you import Chinese steel, you pay China for the steel, you pay the U.S. government the tariff. This is why it's inflationary. Economists have looked at Trump's tariff proposal and said it would make stuff more expensive for Americans by adding the cost of the tariffs to the total cost of production. So that's the way tariffs work. A lot of people don't seem to know how tariffs work, which is sad because this is how people end up getting sucked into Trump's vortex. He says something that sounds good. I'm going to punish China with tariffs.
Yeah.
In this case, that sounds good. Chinese tariffs. They're paid by the American companies.
Wow.
That's why it's so damaging.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Send me this part of the
No, I
conversation.
will. I genuinely had no idea. I thought China was paying those.
Yep. No, China's not paying them.
Yeah. I thought they were, though.
They're not. Yeah.
So you heard what these gentlemen had to say. Pretty surprising that the guy interviewing David Pakman did not even understand how tariffs works. He thought that when Trump is saying we're going to impose a tariff on China, he thought that it means that China is going to pay us, without realizing that the person, or rather the group of people that will pay, is Americans. So if China, for example, is selling pens for 50 cents and you put 100% tariff on them, then now pens are going to cost $1. Well, who's going to pay for it? You, the person who needs the pens, unless you start manufacturing your own pens. But we'll get to that point at a different point in today's show. So the question then becomes, why is Donald Trump even proposing tariffs to begin with? The reason he's doing it is because he's realized that it is a way to generate generate revenue for the country, right? And one of the ways he's proposing to do this is through tariffs. That's one reason Donald Trump is doing it. The other reason I think he's doing it is because for the symbolic representation of saying that we're fighting China. It feels good and it matters to some Americans that America is fighting against China, because some Americans, not just Americans, there are other countries in the world, let me just put that plainly, don't want China to be the number one world power. I was actually having this conversation with my father, who's not American, he's Nigerian. And he was saying that if he had to choose between who should be the superpower in the world, he said he would rather it be America than China. And he went through a long list of reasons why he believes that. So we had that conversation, right? I think the other reason he's doing it as well is to lower taxes on entrepreneurs and businesses, right? And he believes, and I think the people that are voting for him and that support these tariffs are under the assumption that, well, if we lower taxes, is going to encourage entrepreneurs to work harder, create more jobs. Obviously, they're going to have wider margins, because if you go from Kamala's proposed 28% and the current proposed, which is the current corporate tax rate, which is 21%, and Trump wants to bring it down to 20%, then there's going to be more income, more jobs are going to be created, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? That's one of the schools of thought behind that. But the question is, will it lower your taxes? And the taxes I'm talking about are the taxes of everyday Americans. And I think the answer unquestionably is no. Trump is talking about a corporate tax rate. Corporate, meaning for those who have businesses and corporations. If you don't have a business or a corporation, you don't fall under that. Number one. Number two, it is no guarantee that even if a company is paying less in corporate taxes, it means you're going to get a raise. They're not just going to give you a raise just because they have more money. Usually, you get a raise if it's based on the amount of money you make. What's your productivity levels? Are you actually producing to the company? How much money you represent for the company in terms of do you make them a lot of money and all of that? Do you get bonuses and all that? So that's a totally different thing. So these tariffs, the kicker in all of this is that this revenue that we think is coming from China is actually coming from you and I. Because what these countries are going to do that have these tariffs on them is that they're going to increase their prices. And when they increase their prices, when you go to the store and pay for it, you're going to be footing the bill. And that's where the money's coming from. It's not coming from these companies, these countries that are producing these goods. Now let's look at the other side, or the other argument for tariffs and how it could help the United States. Well, one group could say, look, tariffs are good because it encourages Americans to start manufacturing again, right? So we become less dependent on imports, which is a good thing. Yes, it is a good thing for a country to manufacture, and that's one of the reasons why China's invested so much in manufacturing, and therefore they can export their goods all over the world, it seems. So it's a very, very good thing for countries to manufacture their own goods. But let's look at the United States as an example. Let's say that America manufactured 70% of its goods and products that are consumed by Americans. That would sound good, right? Because we're home made, we're making our things in the United States. American companies and business people are benefiting off of it. It's strengthening the economy because people are consuming these things and all that. But there's one part of this that no one is paying attention to, which is if American companies start manufacturing these things, the cost of these goods will go up. They will become significantly more expensive. Significantly. Some of you are like, well, how would that be possible? It's quite easy to see. Just look at the GDP per capita. in the United States? What's the average salary in the United States? How much do you think it costs for example, a company like Nike to manufacture shoes outside the United States? How much do you think it would cost for that same shoe to be manufactured in America? If these companies started manufacturing these goods in the United States, they would have to pay them at least a living wage or a minimum wage, which they don't pay in comparison to the wages that the workers outside the United States make, who make these products that everyday Americans consume. So if they did that, the cost of, for example, a pair of Air Jordans would literally go through the roof. Literally. The other thought behind this, which is, okay, we're going to lower taxes. It's going to encourage entrepreneurs to do well. They're going to make more money and give more and produce more jobs. Well, one thing we do know about the United States is that entrepreneurs are always going to make money. Always. Whether the corporate tax rate is 28% or 21%, they're always going to make money. At one point, it was 35%, and they were still making money. But what people are talking about is trickle-down economics, which is if they do well, then the wealth is going to trickle down to the bottom. Let me just give you guys a stat from Statista.com. You guys can check it out. According to Statista.com, the top 10% of Americans own over 70% of the country's wealth. I'll repeat it once more. The top 10% of Americans own over 70% of the country's wealth. Let me ask you guys a question. If this tax proposal stands and it goes from 20 to 21, from 21 to 20, do you see that number shifting in any way, shape, or form? Of course it's not going to shift. Of course it's not. So when Kamala, for example, says, well, I want to raise taxes on individuals earning over $400,000 a year, if you're getting upset with that and you're making less than $100,000, or rather less than $400,000 a year, and you're watching this show, you're confused about the things you need to be upset at because it has absolutely zero impact on you. This is not even a conversation meant for you. So what she's saying is we'll create revenue for the country through taxing people while at the same time maintaining the price of goods. Had we decided to now impose these tariffs and force American companies to manufacture in the United States. This is just my understanding of it. I'm sure there are people watching this show that are much smarter than me. And what I want to know from you guys is simply this. What are your thoughts on both of these candidates' economic proposals? And what are your thoughts on today's show in terms of my analysis? Whatever you guys think, please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section, and we'll catch you guys on the next show.